What's the worst coworker you've ever worked with? I used to work in a biomedical research lab attached to a university hospital. It was the kind of place where everyone was constantly running around juggling 3 experiments at once. Centrifuges spinning, pipettes clicking, timers going off every few minutes. It wasn't glamorous, but it was good work. Everyone in that lab pulled their weight because if you didn't, someone else had to clean up the mess. Then came Dr. Amir. He was a visiting researcher from another country, mid-30s, came with impressive credentials and an even more impressive attitude. The director, Dr. Chen, introduced him one Monday morning as part of a collaboration program. She said he'd be working with us for a year on a project related to protein expression in bacterial systems. The rest of us, me, 2 postdocs, and 3 PhD students, were polite about it, but we were already drowning in our own work. From day one, it was clear Amir didn't think he was one of us. He wore dress shirts and slacks in the lab, which already told you everything you needed to know. While the rest of us had lab coats stained with years of spills, his looked like it had never seen a pipette tip. At first, we tried to include him. We showed him where the reagents were, how to log experiments, how to book the spectrophotometer, but he never took notes. He'd stand there, nodding like he already knew everything, and then proceed to ask the most irrelevant questions. Not scientific ones, personal ones. What car do you drive? How much is your rent? Why do you eat that for lunch? At first, it was harmless. But after the 10th interruption in a single afternoon, it became clear he wasn't just curious, he just didn't want to work. While we were running assays, he'd walk around the lab like a tourist, hands in pockets, making conversation while you were mid-pipette. Once he came up behind me while I was handling a very expensive enzyme and said, "You ever think this work is meaningless?" I nearly spilled $200 worth of reagents. He spent weeks talking about designing an experiment but never actually doing it. He'd draw elaborate diagrams on the whiteboard, labeling hypothetical results, but he never once picked up a pipette. If someone else happened to be doing anything remotely related to his idea, he'd get territorial about it, claimed they were infringing on his concept. Dr. Chen, who was one of the most patient people I've ever met, started losing her composure around him. One morning, she found him in her office arguing that he shouldn't have to attend safety training because he already understood chemicals. The man couldn't even clean up after himself. If he spilled buffer on the counter, he'd just leave it. If his glove tore, he'd drop it on the floor and walk away. One afternoon, I was working in the adjoining room when I heard him call out, "James, come here." I thought something was wrong. I rushed over and he was standing by the sink with a mug in his hand. Inside was a stringless tea bag. He looked at me and said, "Can you take this out for me?" I stared at him. "What?" He held the mug closer. "There's no string. I don't want to touch it." I thought he was joking. He wasn't. I used a clean spatula to flick it out just to get it over with. He said, "Thank you," like I'd done him a serious favor. A week later, he knocked a lab coat and a few clipboards off the hook behind the door. They fell on the floor and he just stood there staring at them. When I asked why he didn't pick them up, he said, "They fell by accident." "Yes," I said, "so pick them up." He frowned. "But they're not mine." I walked away. By the 3rd month, no one could stand him. He was contributing nothing, interrupting everyone, and starting petty arguments about credit on experiments he hadn't even touched. Dr. Chen tried to mediate, but he dismissed her politely in meetings, saying things like, "With respect, I don't think manual work is part of my role." That was the moment she snapped. She called him into her office, closed the door, and for the first time in my life, I heard her raise her voice. She told him his position was being terminated, effective immediately. I'll never forget the look on her face afterward, relief mostly. Later that day, as Amir packed his things, he walked past my bench and said, "This lab was never the right level for me." I didn't argue. When he left, the atmosphere in the lab shifted overnight. People were laughing again. The centrifuge timer didn't feel like a bomb waiting to go off anymore. Dr. Chen told me later he was only the 2nd person she'd ever fired in over 30 years. And honestly, I still think about him sometimes. Not out of resentment, but as a kind of mystery. How someone could have all the right credentials, all the right education, and still be utterly useless in every practical way. Like working with a child who thought responsibility was beneath him. The lab's been cleaner ever since.